Probably like quite a few of you guys, I'm actually not from Kansas City. I am originally from the suburbs right outside of St. Louis, and there's quite a few differences between here and there. But last fall, my family decided to come visit me for a weekend for the first time since I got up to school here. And one of the first things I decided to do with them was take them to the Nelson Atkins because they had never been before. This happened to be the first trip to an art museum for my dad and my brothers, but for my dad especially, he had some trouble adjusting to the rules because we were followed around by security guards for the majority of the trip as he tried to touch all of the art. And this was his way of just being curious and wanting to see what the materials were and everything. And I'm sure you're wondering what exactly this has to do with my speech, but one of the reasons that I fell in love with Kansas City and chose to come to school here was because of all of the art that was easily accessible here and the culture that the city had to offer. To me, a culture is something that is special or unique to a person or a community. I feel that the art community is something that really makes us so unique from other areas and brings a really great sense of inclusion and innovation to the city while we're still embracing all of the history that we have to offer. Kansas City has been considered a real hub for art in the Midwest. In fact, in a study done by Arts KC, on the National Arts Index, Kansas City was ranked third among 15 other large communities on their participation in culture and arts. And one reason that we likely keep seeing such an increase in participation here is that things like the Arts Council of Kansas City just adopted a new plan in January of 2013 to continue striving to make our art community more diverse and accessible to people of all different ethnicities, ages, genders, and everything else. Something that's really great is that it's not just large groups like them that are helping out and making contributions, but it's also individual people. According to the Kansas City Star, a man named Daryl Chamberlain got the idea to buy enough instruments so that he could start a youth orchestra in an urban part of the city that didn't have access to the funding or the means of doing so themselves. We hear so often all of the benefits of programs that involve students in the arts, and so I love to see programs like this that exist that can bring equal opportunities to kids of all areas. And something I actually got to do last weekend was attend an art festival that was going on. They had a lot of local artists out and doing sidewalk chalk murals and everything. And there was a new dance company there that was performing for people to watch. They said that they had just brought a new dance studio to a community that didn't have one prior to that. It was really great to get to see all of these kids performing who may not have had the opportunity to otherwise had the company not started there and gotten so many donations and support from the community as well. While a lot of these programs are more recently put into place, there are some examples of places in the area that have been around for a long time and served that purpose also. And one of them is the Ballet of Kansas City, was actually founded in 1957, and their original purpose for being put into place was to give young dancers in the area a chance to perform and learn, and they still have programs that allow them to do that. And while all of these things are being done to make the art community here more inclusive, things are also being done to expand the art community that we already had. And so, as before mentioned at the beginning of this, I am originally from St. Louis, and something that's really big in St. Louis is actually live theater. Something I had noticed after coming here was that theater was not as big here or as easily accessible as it is in other large cities, but even over the past year, I've really noticed an increase. According to journalist Robert Trussell, the number of theaters in Kansas City has increased over the years, and so have a number of shows offered. In fact, some theaters have noticed such an impact in their numbers of tickets sold and people coming to the shows that it has even doubled from each season. And this is really exciting. I mean, it may not seem like it, but while other areas and cities are really noticing a decline in the participation and enjoyment of the arts in their communities, we have been noticing an increase. New ways of getting the general public exposed to music and other forms of the arts are always increasing here and can really spark interest in, for instance, in 2015, the Kansas City Symphony played an opening performance of the national anthem before Game 6 of the World Series game, which the Kansas City Star said was the first time in history that a full symphony had performed the national anthem at an event like that. With all of these expanding forms of art and ways that the art is showcased to the public, it's impossible to ignore the kinds that have been around for so long. Kansas City has changed and expanded many times over the years, but a lot of historical architecture is still in place that was built here so long ago. Something that I learned from the Kansas City Public Library's website was that as early as 1920, a lot of the basis for the architectural style in Kansas City was already determined. For about 60 years that followed that, buildings, homes, and other forms of architecture were built in styles that were strongly influenced by Roman and Italian architecture, among many others. Each architect kind of brought his new style in, and together it created a really unique and special look to Kansas City. And of course, I couldn't talk about Kansas City history and art without mentioning jazz. According to kchistory.org, in 1923, there was a new style of jazz that was created here that was very specific to Kansas City. In fact, during the 1930s and 40s, this style of jazz took over and became really popular throughout the jazz scene. Jazz and its history here is something that is still very important and special to Kansas City. Even though I'm not from here, I've really come to love and appreciate everything that Kansas City has to offer. Before actually moving here and starting school at UMKC, I knew that I would really enjoy getting to experience all of the diversity and art that Kansas City had to offer. But it's not until you are actually here and a part of the community that you can really get a full grasp on how strong the culture is and how special the art here really makes Kansas City. The city is consistently trying to make strides to go from the art community of the past into an even better community of the future for Kansas City that is inclusive to everybody and really unique to the